Hello, everybody. I know it's been a minute. Figured we'd hop on live. Waiting for folks to hop on. Let's see who's joining us. Hey, everybody. How's it going? It's been a minute. Wanted to hop on live. It's been a really eventful week, couple weeks. Someone said, say it, free Palestine, free Palestine. Hey, everybody. Hey, everybody, how's it going? Hello. Just want to hop on, start a live. It's been a crazy week, couple weeks. Yesterday, we had this whole TikTok vote on the floor of Congress. I wanted to talk to you all through that, answer any of the questions that you have, answer any updates here in New York, answer any updates and questions that you have about any issue, really, that we've got going on. So wanted to talk about TikTok, about ceasefire, about IVF, around all these crazy things that are happening, and answer some of your questions. So wanted to hop on, answer some of these questions, see what's going on. We'll start with, at the top of the day, the TikTok ban, what's going on, what did I do, etc. So one of the first questions I see here, did you vote for or against the TikTok ban? Now, I voted against the TikTok bill, but I want to talk to you a little bit about why. So first and foremost, there is an insane, like whether you agree with the ban or whether you agree with this or not, there's a huge amount of misinformation about it that is flying in all different directions. So people who are supportive of it, who are against it, there's just a lot of different and wrong pieces of information that are flying around. And I actually feel that way in general in our political environment right now. There's more misinformation than I've ever seen. And so I do want to answer some of the core questions about it. Because one of the things that I'm noticing, and some of it is just well-intentioned, it's just people may not know the difference. There was a full-on TikTok ban that was proposed about a year and a half ago. That ban is different from the legislation that came up this week, which I also voted against. I was against the ban then. I also voted against this legislation that was on the floor this week. But they are different, and it's important for you all to know the difference between the two of those things. So what happened this week was, instead of an outright ban, it is a forced sale, and if the forced sale does not happen, then the app will be shut down. Now, one of the reasons that I voted against it was that this forced sale is, in my view, it's a massive thing that you have to do. TikTok is one of the largest platforms in the United States. I believe it's 130 to 170 million active users in the US. Selling, acquiring, clearing a transaction like that, finding a buyer within 6 months, and clearing any of the antitrust, aka monopoly laws, anti-monopoly laws that exist, in a 6-month timeline from now, I think raises a lot of questions. A lot of those questions are not answered by the speed with which this bill moved through the House. It is very unusual, very unusual for us to see legislation go from being heard and going straight into a markup in a committee to being on the floor of the House under suspension of the rules. They had to suspend the rules in the House in order to vote for this. Under suspension of the rules, all within 72 to 96-ish business hours. Congress doesn't move anything that fast. We've been trying to fund the government for forever. We keep getting these cycles of funding the government forever, but we can move a massive ban on this quickly. That does not even waive antitrust provisions that have serious other such implications to it. It seems strange to me. Additionally, I think there are plenty of things that have been raised. I don't love the amount of lack of clarity that there is. I've been asking a lot of questions in the House, and I can tell you that I've asked a lot of questions of a lot of politicians as to why is this moving so quickly? What is the urgency to you? And why is this, and I don't mean urgency as in why must this be addressed right now in this moment? I'm asking questions about why is this moving within 72 hours? And no one's giving me a clear answer. No one. Which is highly unusual. Especially when there's such open questions around antitrust, around privacy, around data in general. I believe that people should own their own data. And it also doesn't solve some of the core questions around misinformation and disinformation with respect to the U.S. And so, I am not against the principle of a forced sale in general. I want to be clear about that. I do think that there can easily be national security issues, intelligence issues. We do have a responsibility to protect the data and privacy of everyday Americans. I'm not convinced that this particular juncture accomplishes that or solves the problem that we are trying to solve. And so my hope is that at the very least that the Senate this bill has passed the House. It still has to go through the Senate. My hope at the very least is that the Senate can improve it. I think that's the most important part about all of this. So I think my hope is that the Senate doesn't just take whatever the House passed and rubber stamps it, but my hope is that the Senate can improve this. I think at the bare minimum, the Senate should be extending the timeline on this a little bit. I am very concerned about messing with a major communications platform shortly before an election. I think that matters, especially if this transaction does not clear within 6 months. We need to make sure that a sale like that is poised to be successful, and that we can accomplish everyone's goals here. So that's that piece on that. What would get me to a yes? I think, addressing the real questions around antitrust. I think addressing real and salient questions around privacy writ large. The good news is that this bill is being paired with another suspension bill next week, we believe. Another bill next week is being anticipated that prevents U.S. companies from selling the privacy data of Americans to foreign outlets and foreign companies. So that bill, I think, is actually much more suited to be successful. I think it solves a much bigger part of the problem that we have here. But there's still a lot that we need to figure out. And at the end of the day, if it's not TikTok, this will continue to be an issue until we address people's privacy rights, period. And that's, I think, one of the major things that we need to address. So that one should be coming down about next week, we've heard, unless they try to change the schedule last minute. But as it stands right now, that's what we should be expecting next week. Let me see what other questions you all have today. Wanted to make sure that we are talking about this. I want to see what questions you all have. Sorry, I'm pulling this up. I see one question here. Am I still a DSA member? Just got re-endorsed. by New York City DSA this week. Sorry, y'all, I'm just looking through some of the questions you all have. Addressing ceasefire. I think ceasefire is a really important issue. And right now, I think we're getting to a juncture where the conversation around ceasefire is really escalating, and the pressure is escalating a lot. And a lot of that escalation is a lot of that escalation around ceasefire is thanks to all of the activism that you all are having on the ground. Someone said, did AIPAC buy you or did they threaten you? No, I don't accept AIPAC money. In fact, I have joined an effort called Reject AIPAC, which is a fundraising effort by the organization Justice Democrats, as well as several others, to try to take on the influence of AIPAC this election cycle. Not only does AIPAC threaten me? AIPAC threatens anybody who believes in human rights for Palestinians. So have they threatened me? Of course they have. They've threatened me. They've threatened Rashida Tlaib. They threaten everybody. They've threatened Jamal Bowman. They've threatened all of us. It's very public and very well known that AIPAC has committed $100 million to try to defeat all of us and ensure that we do not win re-election. They are supporting primary challengers. They are supporting and funding campaigns. In fact, right next door in the Bronx, Congressman Jamal Bowman has a primary challenger, and his primary challenger raised something like $1 million already to challenge him in probably just a couple of weeks. And almost half of that money came is AIPAC associated. And so this is how politics works. This is how it has worked, but we don't shy away from that. You know, just because powerful people and powerful organizations threaten us, and just because they have put in tons of money into supporting candidates and campaigns, which, by the way, AIPAC has endorsed and supports over 100 insurrectionist members of Congress. That is Republicans that tried to overturn the election on January 6th. AIPAC supports their re-election too. And I think that, to me, tells the whole story, that this is an organization that does not support American democracy, and frankly, their support, I don't know why it's making these things, and frankly, AIPAC's support of people who seek to overturn the U.S. election demonstrates that they are not committed to principles of American democracy, but frankly, their ongoing commitment of the Netanyahu administration, which they themselves, Netanyahu's administration himself, working to dismantle democratic principles in Israel as well, with all of the judicial movement that happened prior to the war that we have here, shows that this is not a commitment to small d democracy globally. And in our commitment to take on authoritarianism here and abroad, and fascism here at home and globally, we have to make sure that we are confronting the scourge of these organizations that try to overturn the will of the people by putting in big money into elections, and also try to organize against the constituencies that actually elect people who stand up for human rights and democracy globally. And so I want to be super clear about that. That's why I've been on ceasefire since day one. That's why we continue to fight for that. And for those of you, again, who aren't aware, Chuck Schumer delivered a pretty monumental speech this morning, and he has historically been one of an extraordinarily pro-Israel, and frankly very close to Netanyahu for a very long period of time throughout his career. He delivered a speech this morning saying that it's time for Netanyahu to go. And that's my view as well. I believe that the leadership that we have seen going into this situation is not what is going to establish peace. And that is what is so incredibly important. You know, people are saying here that is, you know, it's, sorry, y'all, I'm just pulling up the comments here. You know, and I think it's incredibly important that that we do that, and that we have to make sure that we secure that as well. So I'm incredibly, incredibly committed to that. And I think it's important for us to also acknowledge that we're winning. And it's far too many lives have been lost, and far too many people have been, far too many lives have been lost. Far too many people have lost their homes. And, you know, in terms of what we're seeing here, you know, I'm looking at the comments here, the rhetoric that we have seen from Netanyahu and from the far right, the extreme right, in Israel and throughout this governing coalition has been genocidal. It is language of ethnic cleansing. And we can't see losses of tens of thousands, 30,000 people dead, 70% of whom are women and children, and act like this is an accident. You know, I do think it's important also as well to create space and to also know that the attack, the merciless attack on civilians in Israel, was also conducted in a manner that is completely evocative as well of genocidal interest. The Israeli government, with the arms that they have the means for this mass casualty, but I don't think that we should also eliminate, erase, or forget the roots of all of this. And I think that if we're going to move forward, which, by the way, is going to require centering Palestinian leadership, that is Palestinian civic leadership, and the leadership of Palestinians that is democratic, we have to clear the path, and that means that the leadership that we see now cannot sustain. Palestinians have not had a free democratic election in decades, and their voices have not been centered, and the Netanyahu administration has failed in keeping the entire region safe. And so, you know, that to me is really important. Some said, let me also clear this because I talk about misinformation here. Someone said, you voted in support of Israel. Didn't happen. That's one of the common things that you see that's floating around, and people need to be really vigilant about correct and incorrect information. And people just say things, and they just post things, and just because something was posted on the internet doesn't mean it's true. And so anybody can look up my voting record at any time, house.gov, Ocasio Cortez, look up the receipt yourself. I assure you, you can answer all of your questions right there. So I'm going to take a look at some of the other questions here that y'all have. Are you allowed to eat in the House chamber? No. There are doors. There are like these little rooms that are attached to the floor of the House, and those small rooms are where you can go to put down your coat, to get a snack, to freshen up. But on the House floor, no eating, no snacks allowed. Taking a look at some of your other questions here. Let's see. Do you think Roe versus Wade will change if Biden wins? Here's the thing, is that the way governance works is that it's not like, in order for Roe v. Wade, in order for us to establish Roe v. Wade as the law of the land, we need a House majority of Democrats, we need a Senate majority of Democrats, and we need Biden to win. If Biden wins and then it's a Republican House and a Democratic Senate, we won't be able to codify Roe. If it, like Schoolhouse Rock, we need the House, we need the Senate, and we need the White House. Now, sometimes people ask, why couldn't we do this when we have the trifecta at that very short period of time before? Because we had one or two senators, Joe Manchin specifically, that was not willing to overturn the filibuster. If we reelect, Joe Manchin is leaving. So if we get a 50, Joe Manchin is leaving and Kyrsten Sinema is leaving the Senate. And those were the two people, I don't know why there's balloons going up. And those were the two people that were blocking us from changing the filibuster. So if we can get that 50-51 number in the Senate, if we win the House, which I think we are being well poised to do, and if we reelect Biden, then we will be able, I believe, to codify, we will be able to waive the filibuster and codify Roe v. Wade. And we can potentially roll back all this horrendous stuff that the Supreme Court has done. So, taking a look here, someone said Netanyahu's, yeah. Taking a look here. At some of your questions. Sorry, I'm pulling up some of the questions here. One of them is, do you think if Biden came out and called for a ceasefire, he would gain or lose voters? I mean, he did at the State of the Union. He did come out in support of a ceasefire. And I think it's the right thing to do. I think it's where the majority of Americans are at. And I think it's right. Let's see. Am I supportive of a digital rights privacy bill similar to GDPR? I am supportive. I've actually been supportive of a U.S. GDPR since day one, actually, since even before I was elected to Congress. It was something that was part of my original platform when I was starting to run in 2017. For people who don't know, the European Union has much stronger data and privacy rights, and Europeans have much stronger data and privacy rights than Americans do. And I'm very supportive of that as well. Even U.S.-owned companies, including U.S.-owned companies, there is, I mean, really, especially in U.S.-owned companies, there is so much data that's collected about you without your consent, and it's really important that that we regulate that, and that people have the rights to that. Let's see. What advice would you give to new staffers? Interesting. What advice I would give to new staffers on the Hill, or really anywhere, I guess. I think how you do the small stuff is how you do the big stuff. And if sometimes the skills, like when you're, and I think this applies whether you're staffing or really almost in any job, how you do the small stuff is how you do the big stuff. And I personally think that the things that people tend to think are boring, or the things that people tend to think are the tasks that nobody wants to do, or what have you, when you do those with a really, really high degree of precision and excellence, it creates trust that that's just not how you do that one little thing. It's how it's that level of commitment and energy and excellence that you're going to approach everything with. And so, to me, I think that you know, if you're just starting out, like make sure that you pay attention to the details, that the details matter. Learn how to write really, really well. And, you know, I think sometimes people want to work on like the big special projects right away. Sorry if you hear Deco snoring in the background. Sometimes people want to work on like these big special projects right away. But if you can't nail doing the small stuff with excellence, then those big things become, you know, they become further and further away, or they just become really hard to do. So that's, I guess, my support there. What's a typical day consist of? How long are the work days? It really depends on, the day. So like today I'm in New York. And so a New York day can involve, today I was in 2 different offices. I was in our official side office for some of the first part of the day. I had a media interview. I had meetings with organizers. Then I traveled, and then I went to our campaign side office. And then from the campaign side office, knocked out a bunch of work, had a couple meetings. And then stopped by some of our organizing. We had kind of an organizing and petitioning party. We're getting on the ballot now in New York. And then I came home, and now I'm doing this Instagram Live with you all. So it can really depend on where you are. On a DC day, sometimes I wake up 9 a.m. We meet with the entire caucus once a week, discuss things, fight about things, whatever. Then I have committee hearings. I will have internal meetings where I'm managing my staff. I have external meetings where I'm meeting with organizations and people who are trying to fight for different things to get passed. And then we will have votes that happen on the House floor. So sometimes a day can be 8 hours. Sometimes it can be 10 hours. Sometimes it can be 4 hours in the morning and then a gap and then couple more hours in the evening. It really kind of changes a lot day to day. Let's see. Seeing if there's any other questions that y'all have here today. But yeah, I think that's most of it today. I'm hoping to get on a little bit more often, and have a great evening. Bye-bye.